Here we are on beautiful Jones Street.
You saw Ted Jones.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Ted Jones World Podcast to pay homage to Snapchat. I've got the Snapchat hoodie. If you guys did not listen to the last episode or a couple episodes before that, we did have the Snapchat comedy show last Thursday in Los Angeles. I'm popping up some clips from the show. It was amazing. It was at Hollywood Improv in Los Angeles, and truly a great time. I was out in LA for like 72 hours. And while I don't like to negatively speak on a place, it's something that I think I've implemented into my set now for at least, at least for a little bit, is that in LA, you have to do so much more thinking than you do when you're in New York. Now, I know that sounds kind of ironic because people in LA get a bad rap for being like, oh yeah, I'm a surfer, dude. Everything's loose, hang loose. But right when you leave wherever you're at in Los Angeles, you have to have a plan. In New York, you can walk outside and be like, oh, there's a CVS over there. Nah, you know what? I want a snack. That's exactly what I want. I want a snack and, oh, you know what? I'm running low on food. I'll just walk next door. I'll get some groceries. That's what I'll do. In LA, when you leave wherever you're at, you got to be planning where you're going. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to walk out and see what happens, because there's nothing around. Okay? You got to know that you're parking somewhere. You're taking an Uber to a destination. The Ubers out there are super cheap, which I obviously appreciate. And I stayed about half a mile from the Hollywood Improv, which was great. I also had the opportunity to do the Comedy Store, which was very cool, but definitely a successful trip to LA. I could see myself, maybe I've spoken about this to you guys before, I don't really know, but I could see myself spending time out in LA, but I feel like I would definitely have to be on a busier-ish schedule. So when I landed on Tuesday, I booked a super early flight. And the thing is, you don't think about how early you get to someplace, because you're like, you know what, I'll just have the entire day to be there. But when you can't check into the hotel until like 3 or 4 p.m., that's an issue. Luckily, they did have the room ready for me at like 1 p.m., but I just wasn't at the room by 1 p.m. I stayed at the airport and was working on some stuff. I was working on the podcast for y'all to be listening and tuning into. So if you guys do like the podcast, I would appreciate a comment, a like, subscribe, whatever. Message me, Instagram, TikTok, or wherever you guys message me, Snapchat, whatever. But you don't realize, that you're going to spend the whole day there, but you don't get to check in until like sometimes even the early evening. I wouldn't say early evening, I'm being dramatic. Late afternoon, I should say. In between late afternoon and early evening is usually when you check in. But I stayed about half a mile from the Hollywood Improv, and doing the Comedy Store was very cool. That has got to be that was probably one of the better experiences since I've been out to LA, is the Comedy Store. While I did have an amazing time at the Snapchat comedy show at the Hollywood Improv, I hung out and did a show at the Comedy Store. So I was there for probably like almost 2 hours, which was super cool. But Hollywood Improv and the Comedy Store are two of the most legendary comedy clubs in the entire world. So obviously I appreciated the time that I got there. Shout out to Vlad, basically head of comedy at Snapchat. And we had a great time. So it was amazing. But for the amount of time that I was in LA, I had a great time. So I'm going to run over my schedule. What I did, I got in like 9 a.m. I was like, all right, what do I do now? So I was hanging out at the airport. Got to the hotel around like 3:30. I chilled a little bit, had dinner with some Snapchat people, and then Wednesday it was all game time. And I've spoken about this before on the podcast. Usually before big-ish shows, and I say that with quotations, I don't like to eat before. And it depends on what time I eat the night before. Like Tuesday night, I was eating until realistically probably 10:30 p.m. LA time, which on New York time, which I was still on, is like 1:30 a.m. So by the time Wednesday came around, I wasn't super hungry. I do tend to get a little bit hungry from like 3 p.m. in the afternoon to 5 p.m. But then if I wait till the show and rally it out, and this show was a little bit earlier, I went on stage around 7 p.m. I was able to do my set, and then I had a show at the Comedy Store later at like 10:30. So I just didn't eat the whole day. I ended up fasting probably for like 24 hours. But I don't know what it is. I just sometimes, most of the time, will feel more locked in if I don't eat right before a set. And I'll usually cut off eating before a set, like 2 to 3 hours before. And this is like, at most times now when I've done the podcast, I won't eat before because I feel like my thoughts are clearer and I can just get things out quicker. And my energy in my body isn't focused on breaking down food. It's focused on giving you guys the good stuff from my brain. So not eating before a show usually helps. The thing was about my set, and I'm not going to complain at all because it was a great show. It was amazing. It was myself plus 5 other top tier comedians, Gianmarco Ceresi, Zainab Johnson, Alyssa Limperes, Che Dorena, and Eric Griffin. Maybe you've heard of these guys before, but they were all great. And the thing was, I just rewatched the tape from the Hollywood Improv. While I was on stage, there was a lot of walking back and forth, and that was because of the kitchen bringing out orders. You know, it almost felt like a check spot. And if you guys have never heard of a check spot, it's basically towards the end of a show where the waiters or waitresses will drop checks for the show. And that's usually when the audience is a little bit more distracted. And in this particular instance, since we were on a tighter timeline, it did feel like the hosting spot that I did was kind of a check spot. Now, if you guys notice, I'm going to pop up some of the footage here from the Hollywood Improv that I have for my set, but there's a lot of heads walking through the room while I was on stage. And I didn't really notice it as much when I was on stage because it was a big room. There were probably over 200 people in the room, and Hollywood Improv is big, but maybe people weren't as locked in. I'm not giving an excuse. Obviously, I think I still did a great job, but it did feel as if the crowd was more paying attention when the other comics were on stage because there weren't waiters and waitresses running through. And since there was no check spot and everything was paid for by Snapchat, there were no people at the end that needed to pay for everything. So the show basically got started with an announcement from Vlad at like 6:40, and then I was on stage by like 6:45-ish. So I guess I wasn't on stage at 7. I know I said 7 before, but I was right on stage, and then that's when the food was coming out. People got seated at 6:30, so the food was coming out right then, like 15 minutes later, and it did seem like it was that way throughout my entire set. But hey, you know what? Hosting the Snapchat comedy show was still a great time, and I'm happy I got to do it. So I'm not complaining out here. I'm just explaining what I think the situation was. And I know I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I do grade my sets. And in that particular situation, I did feel like a little bit nervous because the stakes were higher, but I'll give myself like a B, maybe on the verge of B+, which is solid. And people say, whoa, Ted, what, you don't get A's? Occasionally, I'll give myself an A-, but that has to be a really great set. And only in my 5,000 times, I'm being dramatic, in the, I'd say 2,000 times that I've been on stage thus far, I've gotten maybe like 3 A's. That's what I'll say. So for the most part, I don't give myself A's because I think that's just like a standard that you really want to get to. Only you shouldn't be giving yourself A's if you're getting A's all the time. It's too easy. And I think like while I would like to think that my stand-up career is going terrifically well, there are certain things that where you can only get an A so many times. Like everything has to be in sync. The crowd's got to be hot. The crowd's got to be honest. You got to have the jokes flowing. Maybe there's like a little in between here and there where your transitions are great. And when I say the crowd's hot, that usually means that the crowd is not as honest as they potentially should be. Like if they're just laughing at everything that you're saying, that usually is a hot crowd. They're there, they're having a great time. If the crowd's honest, they're laughing at the things that maybe they should laugh at. And then obviously if the crowd isn't good, then you'll know, then you'll say the crowd sucks. But in comedy, those are usually the 3 things that comedians will refer to when they come off stage. Most comedians will ask another comic like, hey, how was it? They'll be like, oh, the room is hot. Meaning they're laughing at like the transitions that you're doing. They're laughing at certain things that maybe aren't that funny, but they're just having a good time in there, which is always great. Everybody loves the hot crowd. Why wouldn't you love a hot crowd? Comics and audiences alike would obviously love a hot crowd. And that's usually when the people who are sitting next to you in the audience are laughing. You're going to be laughing too. It'll loosen up the room a lot more. An honest crowd is a crowd that you've had certain jokes hundreds of times that have done well. They're laughing at those jokes. Maybe they're quieter during transitions, but they're still giving you the juice in terms of what you're liking. Now, every comic has a different experience with the audience on stage. That's universally known. But sometimes comics will come out and be like, oh, they were not great. Maybe that comic has low energy, or maybe the audience doesn't like a comic that has a high energy. So there's a lot of different factors to the audience and how good they could be, but this is just a little 411, me letting you guys in on the info. But this particular crowd, they were good. I think that they were honest, I'd say. They were honest, and then as the show went on, they got a little bit hotter. I came on stage in between comics, and it seemed like they were liking just my transition into the next comedian. I do like 20 seconds in between comics, but it was a perfectly length, if that's a word. The show was a perfect length. It was like 75 minutes, and there was a lot of managers in there, a lot of agents, a lot of talent reps, and it's basically the same thing. And then it was less creators than the last show. When we did the Snapchat comedy show at New York Comedy Club in May, it was probably 70% creators and then like 30% management. So they flipped it this particular time. And the room last time was probably around like 90 people. This time it was doubled. So this particular show, I would say, went a lot smoother just from like a management standpoint. And I think hosting wise, I think I did a great job this particular time. And like since I've really only been doing stand-up comedy for real for like, I'd say if I'm going to stretch it out like 6 years, I do feel that like every 6 months or every 3 months, I really am getting better. And I think that's also just the reps on stage. The reps really do help. People talk about that in stand-up comedy. Like you got to be getting on stage as much as you can almost every single night if you're not doing it every night. But I've talked to you guys before. Like last month, I did over 50 stand-up comedy shows in September. And being in New York City, I'm blessed that the city allows me to do that. You really can't be in any other market and do that many shows unless you're doing every single show at the same spot. And while I do probably like 80% of my shows in one particular location, I'm still getting a lot of reps. And I'll do like produce shows, and then I'll do stand-up comedy shows at other venues. But I think being able to do that many spots, there's no way I'm not going to get better. And I think even at some certain time, and this obviously talking to you guys and you guys watching, listen to me, this helps me get better, I think, just because I'm able to get the thoughts out of my brain onto the camera, onto the audio board, but this does help a lot. And I think anytime that I'm able to stand in front of an audience and just be comfortable on stage and just be able to allow my thoughts to move freely, really being present in the room. Shout out to my guy, Tony DeBoss, who's been on the podcast, I think 3 times. We've done a bunch of sketches together. He was just saying, that make sure that the audience knows that you're present there with them. And I don't know if he meant to be that deep when he said that, but I did take that to heart. And it's just a matter of like, yeah, you don't want to go up there and be like, oh, 100%, I got to make sure that my 15-minute set is this. And in certain situations, if you're doing like a 5-minute spot, if you're doing like a late night on NBC or ABC, something like that, yes, you want to go out and you want to bang out your 5 minutes, boom, boom, boom. But towards those longer sets, you really want to be present with the audience. You want to make them feel like, oh, this guy knows that he's in Long Island, or this guy knows that he's in Los Angeles. This guy knows that he's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Knowing certain things about the audience. And then my mom also told me that too, just referring to other comedians like a Jim Gaffigan, who does research on the town before he goes to a certain place. By the way, shout out Jim Gaffigan. He did the Ted Jones Comedy Show like 2 years ago. But certain things that make the audience feel comfortable, like you're in the room with them. And that's why I personally think that crowd work has gotten super hot over like the last 4 years or 5 years. That also has to do with TikTok and Instagram, and then now Snapchat, is that comedians do not really feel comfortable burning material on a social media app. If you're going to be putting up a joke that you do consistently on the road and you're touring 365 days a year, you want people to come see you and then they're shouting out the punchline while they're watching you. You know, and I think there's something to be said for how much crowd work is okay to be posting, but for the most part, you kind of want to keep your joke sacred and close to the heart and keep it for live material. live stand-up material for the people who are paying money for tickets. But I do feel like comedy is alive and well, and especially on an app like Snapchat, where there has not really been much stand-up comedy sketches or anything. And then for those of you who don't know, Snapchat is like a completely PG-13 platform. So anytime that you're on the app, you can't curse. There's no cigarettes, no real alcohol. I'm not really sure about the alcohol, but no smoking. But you have to be careful with what you post on there. And the beautiful thing about Snapchat is that if something is deemed inappropriate, they don't give you a strike. They don't give you a ban for 2 weeks, which sometimes some of these other apps, that's what they'll do. They'll ban you. They can delete your account. And as of right now, it just seems like Snapchat just puts limited reach or limited audience on the information you are disseminating or putting forth on the app. But getting back to it, LA was a great time, 72 hours. I did feel like that third day I was just like semi-exhausted. I was ready to get back. But I think that goes for saying, like, if you grew up in a city that's hustling and bustling like New York, like I did, any other place is just going to feel so slow. And then it goes to say the other way. Like, if you grew up in a small town where you have to drive 20 minutes to get to the local bakery, local grocery store, things in New York would just feel like it's just like an over amount of stimulation, which I understand. I completely get that. So I definitely live on the spectrum where there's so much going on that I kind of need so many things going on in the morning in general and throughout the day. Like, you know what? I wake up, I get the coffee, and as soon as I see since I'm at this current moment, I'm not waking up next to anyone. So the first person I talk to is usually the lady who works at the coffee shop, Hi, Ted. Hi, what's up? How's it going? And there are 20 people at the coffee shop. Within like 15 minutes of me waking up, I see all these people. I walk on the street, get a little bit of sunlight. And right now, being in New York, thanks God, it's not super cold. It's definitely hoodie and shorts weather, which I think it'll be for like the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll see. Once it hits Thanksgiving time, then it's going to be cold. But being in New York, I love the quote unquote overstimulation. I don't mind it. And then people will say, like, how do you live in a place that doesn't have the trees and the grass? I don't mind it. I like the concrete, and I think having so many things available for me to do, like, I don't get overwhelmed by that. I'm pretty good at deciding what I would like to do at a particular moment. And like if I'm watching TV, for example, and I see too many options on the TV, I'll be like, no, it's okay. I'll just pick this particular one, or I'll watch the other one later. And I think people get overwhelmed by the amount of choices. Like, if I went to a diner, and given that obviously you guys know I'm vegan, if I went to a diner, I don't think I would have that difficult of a time picking what I want. Granted, a diner is all like eggs, bacon, cheese, and omelets, which is, an omelet is with cheese and eggs, but I wouldn't have such a difficult time picking things. And I think people do get overwhelmed if you're overstimulated. I myself, I don't. So we've got as you guys are listening to this, we do have the Yankees. Hopefully, oh my God, I might be speaking too soon, but tonight the Yankees are playing to be in the World Series, and that'd be fresh, man. The Yankees are, what's so interesting, how big the baseball players are now? I'm pretty sure the steroid era is over, but it's just like, these baseball players have evolved to be huge. Like, all these great baseball players are like 6'5", 250 pounds, which is nuts. And then these pitchers are throwing their fastballs at the fastest velocity they've ever thrown them, which makes sense. So like, everything's evolving. But these pitchers, they've talked about how, like, on broadcast, about how they're pushing the limit about how fast like a human body can actually throw the ball. Like, throwing the baseball 105 miles an hour 15 years ago just did not exist. Maybe there was one guy who could throw it like 101 or 102 a few times, but all these guys in the major leagues who are throwing the fastball, they got to be throwing it at least 97 miles an hour, or you're out of the game. They don't have any finesse pitchers really, like a Greg Maddux, just because they would get worked, man. They would get worked. That's just my perspective from the from the baseball point of view. But it's funny how there are 162 baseball games, and then people only really get locked in for like the last 15, which I guess makes sense. It's kind of the same in basketball, but I feel like people pay a little bit more attention to basketball than they do to baseball, just because baseball is a slower sport. But since baseball implemented the pitching clock, it's brought in games from 3 hours to 2.5 hours, which really is a difference. Especially if you're watching it on TV, you get some time to scroll in between the pitches, but I think that helps too. And maybe football, theoretically, I could be controversial in saying this. I think football's got to speed up a little bit. All sports need to speed up just a little bit. Tennis has been doing a good job with the serving clock. That's sped up time in between points, but tennis needs to figure out what they're going to do with the 3 out of 5 sets and then the women playing 2 out of 3 sets at Grand Slams. While I do believe in equal pay for men and women, there's got to be something to be said at like the US Open and all the Grand Slams, how men and women are paid equally, but the men are on court for twice as long. But I don't want to start a gender war over here. I'm just saying, men literally are on court sometimes for the entire tournament for like 30 hours, and then a woman who makes the finals can be on court for 10 to 15 hours. So there's got to be something to be said there. While I do love tennis and how physical it is, it's tough to have to go play a 5-hour match and then you're out practicing the next day, and then the following day you're playing another 5-hour match. That's got to be tough. But tennis season almost wrapping up. Tennis is a grueling schedule. Sports in general, it's got to be so grueling. Like everything that is put into your body, and then by the time you're 30 or by the way, as I'm saying this, my back kind of hurts. As I'm 30, once you hit 30, 35 years old, like you're done. You have to figure out, what am I supposed to do for the next 50 years or 60 years? Or if you're going to be living a lot longer, maybe the next 70 years. We'll see what happens, man. Hopefully society lives longer, but there's a lot of not great stuff that's going on in the world. But hopefully, you guys listen to this podcast and you're like, oh, well, this is a great thing that's part of the world. Yeah, guys. Well, that was my tangent for the day. But I'm looking forward to the rest of 2024 as it slowly begins to wrap up. Things that are coming up for me. I am still going to be posting a ton on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, once a week here on YouTube. And, if anything comes my way that is super exciting, I'm definitely going to let you guys know. But I guess I will let you guys know it's a little bit early. November. Sorry, I have to check my calendar just so I don't mess this date up for you guys. What is it? It's freaking... Sorry, I'm looking here. November 22nd and November 23rd, I will be at the Catch a Rising Star Comedy Club at Princeton, which is actually 2 minutes away from where I was born. When I spent 6 weeks in Princeton, New Jersey, that's where I was born. The comedy club is 2 minutes away from there. I'll be featuring for my good friend Olga Namer, who has been doing the Jewish skits with me. We've been doing Jewish in a restaurant, Jewish at Whole Foods, Jewish at Trader Joe's, Jewish in the cars. But if you haven't seen that, check out my TikTok or Instagram. You guys can check out those videos. They've been doing very well. They're hilarious. But yeah, that's the next thing that I have that's on the road. I'm sure I'll be in Long Island doing shows, but just stay tuned on my Instagram. And if you guys have any further questions about when I'll be in your city, hit me up, ted@tedjonesworld.com. I always love hearing from you guys. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. And if you guys have anything further for me, suggestions, you want to compliment me, you have a bone to pick with me, just let me know. I'm always happy to hear it. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in and listening. And till the next Ted Jones World podcast, we'll see you next time, Thursday. Goodbye. Peace. Get home safe. Bye.